now present Martha Mertz.
Thank you.
And when she said yes, I was very, very happy for her to be
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you so much.
I need to follow up on what Zeki has just said, because I have had the privilege of giving an ATHENA Award in the Parthenon. They do have a sculpture of Athena that is a replica, and she is like 5 stories tall, incredibly awesome. And if, you know, just to be in the presence in that place, it was amazing. So this Athena idea didn't come directly from Athens, but it's been there circuitously since then. I'm delighted to be here today. The talk that I'm going to give is not like any other talk I've ever given, because I've been inspired by the people who have been speaking here. So let me tell you first that in a former life, I was a nun who didn't speak, a cloistered nun. So I think that probably gave me all the meditation I needed for what I've been doing in this life. I am I think I'm kind of well balanced, because I'm a Capricorn by sun sign and a Cancer by rising sun. So those two are directly opposite each other, and it feels to me like I've got both of those. In my former life, before I became kind of an ambassador for this idea about leadership, I was a businesswoman. And you know, I think we all have trigger moments in our lives when something comes along, something happens, you're presented with a circumstance, and you take a direction. You go in that direction. So let me tell you my story. I had started a business back in a time when women didn't start businesses. Women weren't seen to be business people. And therefore, I put my family name with my married name so that people would think that I had a male partner. So people would call and say, could I please speak with Mr. Mayhood? That was my family name. And I would say, you know, he's out of state right now. I'm Martha Mertz, how can I help you? And he was out of state, because my dad lived in Arizona at the time, and I was in Michigan. But it just goes to show you where things were and how change has happened so rapidly. So I had this company, and I was doing very well. And it was also, Sarah McLean was here this morning, and she spoke about having been in real estate in Washington, D.C. Well, mine was a real estate brokerage company. I thought that was interesting. So somebody decided that I would be a good candidate to sit on the board of the Chamber of Commerce. This was in Lansing, Michigan. So I didn't care about the Chamber of Commerce at that time. I was just out in my little realm doing my thing. But I said yes, and went to the chamber and spent a whole year learning how to speak male. That was 1 year. And then the second year was, it's ridiculous that I am the only woman on this board. I need to bring some friends, some people in, some other voices, because I could see that the men on that board didn't think the way I did. It was almost as if I was looking out of this window and they were looking out of that one. So I had nominated 2 women for the board, and my male colleagues told me, Martha, those women aren't leaders. Really what they were saying is women aren't leaders. It made me feel like, you know, what am I doing here? But let me tell you about those women. One has been in the United States Senate as a senator for the last 15 years, and the other one was the chief of staff of the largest medical hospital in the area. Eventually, they weren't at the time, but they were already leaders. So the message to me and the turning point for me was in this setting, I was seeing that not only were women not perceived as leaders, but we really didn't see ourselves that way either. We didn't. So my purpose in being here in this life, I figure, and after a time you can start to see why you're here and what you are supposed to be doing with this life. My purpose here is to create a balance in the voices of leadership in this country and globally, because our world is out of balance. And we need to get back to balance. When you see anything out of balance, it just doesn't work. It's the law of physics. And you can see, just by looking at some of the countries in our world today, that when there are no women's voices that are taking leadership roles, they fall off the table, they fall off the cliff, they get out, they get away from the other side of humanity. And we're seeing that now. I hope it's the struggle before the end of that. But at any rate, for the last 30-some years, I've been talking about creating a balance in the voices of leadership, because that's where we need to get to. In order to do that, from within a chamber, which was all men and women weren't leaders, I started what is called the ATHENA Award, and it is an award that has been now around that long. It was originally given for 3 criteria, and I'm proud to say that they've never needed to be changed. In fact, nothing that we did in the original setting up of this ATHENA idea has ever needed to be changed. So it just tells me that, you know, I was kind of channeling maybe the goddess wisdom or whatever, because I couldn't have come up with it. Let me tell you what we honored. We honored someone who had achieved the highest level of professional excellence. Didn't matter what the profession. It was then also someone who had given back of their energy and their talent to whatever sphere of influence they had. So it's like the flow of energy. First it comes to you and you succeed in your vocation, whatever it is, and then you take your energy and you spread it out to the world. And then the final thing that we said were part of these 3 criteria is that this has to be a person who has opened leadership opportunities for others, particularly for women, because that's what was out of balance as I saw it. So those were the original 3 criteria for the ATHENA Award. It's given once a year in the communities that carry this award to one person. There are nominees, but there's one recipient, and there are now over, I don't know, 7,500 ATHENA recipients around the globe. Thank you. It lifts up a whole community when it happens, because then people start to see this is the new face of leadership. You know, it doesn't look like those guys, always. So along the way, I was privileged to go to a lot of ATHENA Awards in various cities across the country. And in one city that I recall particularly, the woman, now there are 300 people, leaders in the community, she's been identified as the recipient. She's walking up to the podium, and the first thing she says is, "I don't really see myself as a leader." And I'm like, what? That's why we did this. But I thought, oh my goodness, massive humility for this woman. But I heard that again and again. And about the 4th time I heard that same statement, the first thought out of these people's heads who are being honored for having done magnificent things, I knew that that wasn't what they were saying. What they were saying is, the definition of I don't see myself leading in the way that I read the definition in the dictionary. It isn't the same thing. And so we studied. We got a grant from the Kellogg Foundation, and we studied how do women lead. And this is back, not quite 20 years ago. But the sample that we got was a pure sample, because it was before women were getting MBAs in leadership and picking up theory and so on. Lots of these women, most of them, hadn't been raised to think of themselves as leaders, to focus on getting to that point. It wasn't expected by their families, et cetera, et cetera. They found themselves in a moment when their voice was necessary and they spoke their truth and became influential. But they still didn't see themselves as leaders. So we studied about 400 people who had been ATHENA recipients from across the country, and we found 8 strengths that these women bring to leadership that aren't part of the standard leadership. And what we call this the ATHENA leadership model, and it really is the most important thing that this organization or I've ever done. This was the reason for all of this journey, was to find this and to give it back to you. It is my gift, because we need to know what kind of leadership is effective for us, and then we need to own these traits as true leadership traits. And I will also say that it isn't just for women. It's for everyone. In fact, it's important that everyone will learn this, but it's drawn from women, and it came through us. So let me just tell you, for centuries, women have been leading using these strengths. The traditional model for leadership, sometimes I call it the male model, depends on my audience, is a command and control kind of leadership. It's a hierarchy. It's the top, and then it's the next rungs, and it's title and position, and it's hard to communicate, and it has its place, and we all have learned that. We had to. But what women do, and so I think of it as a ladder, just to visualize things. I think of that as a ladder. I see the way women lead is in a circle. We've always been in a circle. From the earliest days around the fire, women had constraints in terms of, how far our reach was. So what we've done is find ourselves in a circle. We rely upon each other for different talents and strengths and capabilities and so on. We rely upon each other and have learned to do that. It's come down through generations. And I'm going to go through this model quickly. But I want to say that because I've never made a presentation to this kind of a group, I'm going to be asking you to help me today to understand how or whether this resonates with you as women who are devoted to a more spiritual path, a more esoteric path than a lot of the groups that I talk to. So I'm here to learn from you today. I don't know whether you expected to be teaching me, but that's your job. So let me just see, make sure I covered that. So I found in preparing for this, I went back to my own book, which was written so long ago that I don't know what's in it, but it wasn't that long ago. I just have a short memory. And I found a passage in that book that I'd like to read to you, because leadership really begins with a vision for something different, for something, it's transformative. Leadership, this kind of leadership is transformative. And so I found this statement, and I'd just like to read it to you because it kind of sang to me yesterday. Leadership begins with a vision. It's the ability to dream, to lift the eyes of your soul beyond the familiar, to behold the unimagined. Vision identifies possibilities. Vision ignites passions. It is the depth and scope of a vision, the innovative, charismatic, transformational power of it that opens the way for leadership. And that's what I'm talking about. Because we all lead. I'm going to take a detour here. About 4 years ago, I was at a class or a gathering, and a woman came up and popped up in front of me, and she was a perky redhead, and she took a big deep breath and she said, "Hi, I'm Sue Ellen Allen, and I spent 7 years in Perryville prison, and I love your book and your model. Will you go to prison and teach this model?" So that was 4 years ago. And I thought, you know how the mind runs through all the, what? Take this to prison? I've only taught this to women who are the high achievers and the people who are trying to get there. It never occurred to me. And, you know, all the time this little tape is running through my head. And at the end of my breath, I looked at her and said, yes. So now, fast forward 4 years, we have had each class, and it's hard to get a class into prison. It was harder yet to get a former inmate to be able to be allowed to go back. I mean, there are all sorts of little hurdles that you'd never think about. We got it into the prison. It's Perryville Prison. It's just outside Phoenix, all women. And we've graduated maybe about 600 women from this class, and it happens every week for 6 weeks. And we take this model and we teach it. And the statistic that I want to tell you is, of the people who have been released, and it's probably about half of them, of the people who have been released, only 6% of those people have gone back into prison. Let me tell you what is remarkable about that. The standard recidivism rate is 60%. Wow. So something is happening. It's like watching people nourish themselves in a way. It's like they are finding their own empowerment because somehow life did not provide that for them. And it's really amazing. But for me, it's a graphic illustration about the power of this model. Because you can see, I mean, people I talk with, and I've taught this in China and Africa and India and Russia and, oh my goodness, lots of places. Different cultures. You know, people have an understanding of the world that is not the same as mine. But I see it resonate. And it resonates because it's come from all of our grandmothers hundreds of generations ago. It's come through women all this time. It isn't an American model. It's not a Western Hemisphere model. It's a model for women. And I know that because I've seen it resonate. So let me get to the model so we don't run out of time here. There are 8 principles. The first principle in this model we called living authentically. And you know, I now hear authenticity used as quite a common word. But back when we put this model together, it was, I don't know that I'd ever used the word before in a full sentence. But the most important aspect or trait of a leader, any leader, is to be living authentically. And you know when someone isn't. You can tell. It's very fascinating because everyone else can see that person isn't authentic, except the very person who, you know, stands before whatever life and talks about their values and teaches people or exemplifies whatever they've got, but they are not living that. And there's a space between what they're saying and what they're doing. Some of you are nodding. I think that we see this, but it's a clear understanding of how a person has strayed away from the truth that they know, that they want to have for themselves. So it's knowing yourself. And we started this morning with meditation. And I think that's one magnificent way to find the answer to the question, who is it that's looking out of the eyes that you are looking out of? Who is that? Who am I? Who am I? What do I value? How do I live those values? And you cannot inspire someone unless you are true to your core. Unless you can't. People just won't be inspired by it. Your words are something, but exemplifying the message that you have, that you carry, the essence of who you are, that's very inspiring. And so when you start with a core like that, then you can lead people. Let me make sure I didn't miss out on anything, because I really, oh yeah, here's one part of this. The ego takes a back seat when you are authentic. The ego takes a back seat, and this is the reason for that. When you have when you are living your own core values and you have this strong understanding of yourself, you don't need to have the constant strokes from other people. You have who you are pretty well embedded. And so, you know, we watch people's needs and people behaving and so on. Just pay attention to yourself, because being an authentic person and living authentically and knowing who you are things that don't just happen one day and then you graduated away from that. Because we keep changing. All of us keep changing. And so you have to constantly be checking in so that you know, you don't say, well, I'll never do this, but just this time I'm going to deviate from my norm. And then pretty soon people deviate away and away and away, and pretty soon they're nowhere near what their core sense of understanding of who they want to be is. So I love that about the ego part, because we all can relate to that. Shakespeare said it. This above all, to thine own self be true. Right? We all know that one. Mm-hmm. That's what he meant. And that's the first, most powerful part of leadership. Okay, I'm going to move on. I could spend a lot longer on each one of these. Learning constantly is the next one. We found in the studies that we did that the people who are in leadership positions that consider themselves to be the fountain of all knowledge have stopped learning. The world keeps moving. They are left behind. They are left behind. Now, this is something that women are really good at. I mean, let me just backtrack. You are good at all of these things. They're already in you. This is not, you're not having to learn it. It's just, I'm shining a little flashlight on these things that you already have all the time. It's just be aware and call it leadership, because my quest is to change the definition of leadership, include women. Okay, so learning constantly is something that we've always been good at, because we never think we know enough. That's the first thing. One of the wisest things I ever learned to do was to say, I don't know. Instead of, you know, trying to figure out a fancy dance answer to something, I don't know, but I'm going to find out. And I'll research that and be back to you. We are so good at learning more than just from words. It's that EQ. You know, we can be with a person, and you can hear the words. But we also take in everything else. We take in the facial expressions, the tone of voice, the body language. We take all that in, and it's all part of the same message. And so one of the things that learning really encompasses is listening. We are excellent listeners. And that's part of being a leader, because if you are always just expounding, then you're not learning anything. But if you're taking things in, you are gathering the kind of wisdom that you need to work with people and to be effective. So learning constantly. I've got lots of stories there, but I don't have time. So the next one that we found, those two have to do with internal development. Making sure that I know who I am, and and staying open to be always observing and learning. And the next two have to do with outreach. So if you're a leader, you're going to probably be interacting with people. The first one we found, strength that women have, is building relationships. We like to do that. Women like to build relationships. And it isn't just about the title, you know, it's, boy, if I get to know him, he's the vice president in charge of whatever, then that's going to help me. Well, that isn't really our MO at all. We like to build relationships because we care essentially deeply about somebody else. And it isn't just the title or the place that you are, it's how your family is and what are you worried about this week. And I mean, our hearts go out to other people. We love to do that, but it's an important part of leadership to build, and especially now, just think, we live in this world where we're operating across continents and across cultures, all kinds of differences that we need to understand and so on. But the true core of it all is that we want to build, we want to reach out, we want to be with other people and be part of this great human experience that we are. And right in line with that one is the next one, which is fostering collaboration. We like to work together. Kind of go back to the image of the circle. We like to work together. Leadership has levels. There are levels of excellence in leadership, and the level 5 leader is the person who will take in all the perspectives and not just mine. Now see, I have this perspective and I'm leading a company and I have ideas and these are the problems and this is the way I think we should solve them. If I didn't reach out and bring in other perspectives and listen to other ideas, then it would all be kind of, it gets into the tyrant phase. We don't do that. You know, we want to know what people think. I served on a bank board one time, and we sat on what I called the 14th floor, and we were pretty wise up there, and we were analyzing all the outcomes and strategies and so on, and I thought to myself, why don't we go downstairs to the first floor and ask the tellers what this strategy is doing in the market, because they're the one group in our bank that is interacting on a daily basis with the public. You know, we're trying to discern how good we are up there. I didn't have enough courage at the time to say that in this board meeting, but I have certainly learned the importance of understanding other people's perspectives, trying to think through their eyes, trying to see things from that other vantage point. You know, I say other, and that's one of the things that our world does. We other people. You know, it's the others. It's us and then it's the others. And we've all been othered here and there along the way. We all have. And it's not a good thing. You know, so fostering collaboration is kind of putting aside othering so that we can pull together, hold together, gather a tapestry of thinking. Ultimately be decisive, every leader has to be, but to understand the fullness of approach to whatever it is the ultimate wisdom, and it's the level 5 leader who can do that. So that's one. Now the next two are the spark and the flame, really, for leadership. One of them is acting courageously. Every leader finds a time when you have to stand up and show up and tell your truth. Every leader does. It's a very hard thing to do, partially because the further you get along, the more transformational your leadership is. The greater the need for change, the more courage you're going to need, because people resist change. A lot of people will find a way to set you aside if you are proposing anything that has to do with change. I can speak to that, but I'm not going to. This is the place where you find your voice in acting courageously. It's where you find the way to articulate what is this value that I have, and how am I going to express it to the world. I've got a quote in the book that I wrote. I just love it, because oftentimes when we think of courage, you know, it's the lion heart. It's muscular. It's very male. The courage to go out and slay the dragon or whatever. But you know, what this quote says is courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the little voice at the end of the day that says to me, I didn't succeed today, but I'm going to try again tomorrow. And that's courage, too. Right? Okay. The next part of spark and flame is advocate fiercely. So we all have some passion within us, some place, some catalyst that triggers us to take a step out and perhaps outside of our comfort zone. Let me tell you mine. Well, you know that I have been a fierce advocate for women in leadership for many, many years. And I told you how it was ignited within this Chamber of Commerce setting. But the real seed was planted when my brother was born. My little brother, you know that guy, King David? King David. When he was born, the family celebrated, you know, finally we have a son. And I figured out, I was 3, wait, what's the deal here? What is happening? What's so special? And that's when my little flame went up. And I never let go of it. So anytime that I've had a chance to move women forward in some way, I'll take the chance. I'll open the space. I'll go through the door for that. And it really changed my life, because now I'm out here talking about my little brother, King David, who didn't really like that very much, but I don't tell him. So advocating fiercely is using your voice. You find your voice, then you're using your voice to do something. And does anybody here know your passion? I mean, you don't have to say what it is, but do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. It's a strength within you, and it's just there, and it's just part of the fabric of you. And so that's part of a leader. You know, you have something, or you're here to find your passion. You know, this woman who came out of the prison system, she was 57 years old and she had breast cancer when she went into prison. And she said, I found my passion in prison. She had been a business leader in Phoenix. But she said, I found my passion in prison. My passion is to lift these women up and help them reconstruct themselves and come out of that place. And live a life, find a new chapter, engage with the people within their sphere of influence and make a difference from what they've learned on that journey, because it's a hard journey. So we don't always find our passion right away at age 3. I was lucky. I didn't know it at the time. I probably grumbled. But still, that's part of leadership, is you are using your voice to make the world a better place. You are transforming the world in some way. And it doesn't have to be huge. These things can be hardly noticeable, but it matters. It matters. Okay, I have 2 more. They have to do with so what? What's in the leadership realm here? Why do we do this? Well, one is, this is also just so part of women, we do not work just to work. We don't work in order to get big zeros. It's not that game with us. We work in order for us to find a way to give back. Giving back is a core value for women. We want to leave a different legacy. We want there to be, because just think of it, each one of you is an utterly unique human being. And there's only one person who can do the work that you can do in the way that you will do it in this time. And that's you. So giving back is a big part of that. And your footsteps should be in the sand of humanity. That's why you're here. So one of the most fabulous things that is attributed to women's leadership is that it's a very important quality for us. It's that energy cycle again. It's not all about me. It's got to be what I do. I take these gifts I have, I take these things I've learned, I take this experience and this understanding and this passion, and I make a difference in the world. It's an important part. And then finally, this one's the hardest one to describe, but we celebrate. We called it in the beginning celebration and joy. And I've learned recently that joy, the joy part, is really being aware of and grateful for the life that you have. The being in the body, being in this place. That's the joy, just knowing that. But the celebration part is, you know, we go through these circumstances. Maybe you're part of a company, maybe you're part of a group, certainly you're part of a family. The experiences that you've had together, let me just use business. Let's say there's a project that you've got going, and everyone's pitching in to work hard. And let's say that at the end of this project, you don't succeed. You didn't reach your goals. Still, you come together and kind of memorialize the moment. You know, you discuss it, you debrief, you remember together. And if it's an achievement, then that's much easier to see. But we like to, there will never be another group like that dealing with that particular thing. And we like to memorialize that in rituals of some sort. I was at the 4th Women's International Forum in Beijing, China, a few years ago, and 95. And there were women from 177 countries there. And the Chinese were very afraid of the women coming to Beijing for this conference. And so they shipped most of us, the NGOs, of which I was one, off to this little town. It might be like Cornville. They had no capability for dealing with this number of people. It rained every day we were there. And for the first day, we were all just, you know, we came all the way from wherever, and this is how we're being treated. I mean, my feet were wet, and everything was muddy. And Bella Abzug had a tent that she spoke in right next to the garbage containers. I mean, it was just pretty awful. So there was this wave of anger. And the second day, there was this wave of, oh no, we're not going to go there. We're going to celebrate the fact that we're all these people together, that we are not going to have this time wasted out of anger. And so the rituals started coming out, and the women from, I don't know, Lithuania, you know, did their dances, and somebody read poetry, and other people sang and played instruments and wore beautiful things, and we started to celebrate just the fact that we were there, regardless of whether it was raining and our feet were wet. And I just love that, because it was 8 days of recognizing the importance of being together and so on. And so celebrating is like that. We do that, and we do it with rituals and so on, but it memorializes something that is important in our lives. So, now, one of the things that I like to do, that's the whole model. But remember, I said I've taught this in lots of different places, but not here. To this different focus of a group, I've never started a talk talking about my astrological sign. Never. Probably never will again. Or that I had another life where I was a nun. You all look like, oh, okay. But, you know, that's just an assumption on my part. It wasn't necessarily true, but it was important for me, and you learn as you go along in your life to know what your purpose is and what your hurdles are and so on. For me, my hurdle was absolute terror at speaking in public. Terror. So I had to find my voice, and we all do in a way. And it isn't necessarily just standing up and speaking in public. It's knowing the content. It's knowing the substance. It's knowing what it is that you are meant to be saying. So what I'd like to do now is something that we call, this is a version of an Athena World Cafe. And I'd like to do that with you, and it means that we're going to have to get up and move to those tables, so that we can discuss a couple things. And you will notice on the table, each of these tables, that I have 2 of these principles. I would like all of you to pick one of the principles. I've got a little basket up here. I don't want you to look at it. I want it to be blind because my understanding is that the principal actually picks you. And so then I'd like you to go to that table, wherever you see that, and sit down, and then I'm going to ask some questions. And by the way, on these tables there are a couple pieces of butcher block paper, that kind of paper, and there are marking pens. And so because we're creative beings, and sometimes the brain and the hand work in tandem, and sometimes you just need to make it into a graphic somehow, pick up that stuff, play with it, but at the same time I'm going to ask you to answer a couple questions that I will ask. And let's get that part done, and then I'll ask the questions. So here are the principles. And then go find your table.